Hello, inmates. It's been a while since you've heard me, I think. It's almost definitely been a while since you've heard me. It's Safety Matches. Matches? Safety Matches is just the whole name. Matches is what my friends call me. I'm back this week because I won a Scorch. That's the way it works. If you're listening this far, you probably know that by now, but maybe you picked this episode randomly, so I hope that helped you out, random citizen. I do believe that the prompt for this week was I think it's a quote from Across the Spider-Verse. One second, I can find it, listeners. I can find it just for you because you are special. Yeah, it's "Don't call yourself a hero. That makes you sound like a self-mythologizing narcissistic autocrat." That's the prompt. That is the prompt that I did receive. I know normally the stories that I write tend to all be in sort of the same fantasy setting. This is a little different than that. This is actually a more superhero themed setting that I have been working on for a while. I tend to work on it less for the Scorches because I envision it being a comic book instead of like a book or something, and until I find an illustrator to work with or perhaps learn how to draw myself, that dream is not, quite as in reach. That's the way it is. I know I've won at least a few Scorches with this superhero setting, but that was in the before times. I genuinely don't know how long it'll take for any of those to be recorded and uploaded to the podcast because of where they lie in the order of the old ones that are getting uploaded along with the new ones. So that's exciting. Well, I will say that something about this setting is that I didn't want it to be so, like Marvel VCE, where it's so always returning to the status quo, so I would always want it to be like one continuous story from beginning to end. And when I say I've been working on this for a number of years, the earliest version of this setting that I can remember was probably when I was like 12, and it was just the most shameless ripoff of the Suicide Squad that you could ever imagine. Luckily, I've differentiated it a lot by now, but all the main characters are supervillains because I think that's cool. I like doing that. I've waffled around enough. I can just start reading it. I've won so few Scorches in this chunk of time that I can't remember how to behave. Okay. Inferno found himself in an agonizingly familiar situation. Well, it was almost familiar, at least. He was what many would call a supervillain, standing at odds with someone that many would call a superhero. And how he had gotten into that situation, that was the weird part. Inferno's girlfriend had informed him a while back of a great threat to her family. Her father, some rich talking head, had his home burned to the ground. An act of arson, they said. An attempted assassination. She had to be away for a while to be safe and help her father. The kicker? She blamed him. Well, she didn't know that her boyfriend was Inferno, but he was hurt nonetheless. He never took jobs to hurt those he cared about. That was across the line. But jobs to burn things? Apart from his more regular employment as part of the strike force, burning down houses and buildings so political figures and corporate goblins high on their own gas was his bread and butter. And this wasn't him. As funny as burning his girlfriend's dad's house down sounded at times, he was a professional. He went there to investigate the ruins of the mansion. Dressed in street clothes, his flamethrower left at home, armed with only a gun that fired thermite capsules. And once he got there, he was honestly more insulted. Inferno was an artist with fire. The implication that he burned this house down was like saying Picasso only drew stick figures. The cause? A toaster in the kitchen with faulty wiring. At first, Inferno was relieved. He was expecting to have to track down and disappear some amateur. But now he knew he just had to leave. That is, until he was intercepted by Hurricane. A damn hero. Inferno stood perfectly still, his hand on his thermite gun. "Stop right there, and don't move," a commanding female voice shouted at his back. He waited. The house was in horrible condition, and all it would take is one unlucky step. And as the footsteps came closer behind him, he heard her stumble as the charred floor gave way beneath her foot. Inferno spun around fast as lightning, the thermite launcher aimed and ready. Hurricane froze. Hero and villain practically stopped in time. At first, Inferno thought it was because they were in a standoff of sorts. Hurricane's ability to manipulate water and potentially even control the weather were powerful, but she definitely wasn't fast enough to stop Inferno from getting a shot off if he needed to. But it was what happened next that really shocked him. Hurricane slowly lifted her hands up and pulled her mask off. "Kane? You're Inferno?" The commanding tone was replaced with shock and hurt. It was Cassidy. He'd been dating her for months. He'd fought Hurricane more than once in that time, too. His first instinct was to try and lie about his identity as Inferno, but Cassidy wasn't a moron. He was holding a pretty unique weapon, after all. Cassidy's features twisted in rage. "You're a villain? You? Burned down my father's house?" Inferno lifted his hands in a gesture to relieve the tension. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Villain is a strong term. Mercenary is probably more accurate. And more importantly, I didn't do this. I'm quite frankly insulted at the idea." Hurricane raised her hands. "Then why are you here?" Inferno let out a groan of annoyance. "I was here to figure out who really did it if I could. It was that god-awful antique toaster with faulty wiring, by the way." Inferno almost laughed at the thought. To think his current situation was brought about by a damn toaster, of all things. Hurricane blinked and seemed to be taken aback. "You're here? For me? Because you wanted to help me?" She paused for a moment before a stern expression locked on her face. "It doesn't matter, Kane. I'm a hero. You're a villain. You know how this goes." Inferno glared at her. "First off, you're welcome. Second off, don't call yourself a hero. That makes you sound like a self-mythologizing, narcissistic autocrat." He wished that was an insult of his own creation, but in truth it was stolen from one of his associates. Hurricane opened her mouth to start shouting, but the sound of police sirens cut her off. She must have reported someone creeping around the burned-down house before coming to confront him. Inferno hoped beyond hope things were different now that she knew who he was and why he came here. He could practically see the battle going on inside her head as the sirens got closer and closer. Finally, her expression changed from the stern one to one that said, "I'm going to regret this, clear as day." She spoke only one more word. "Go." Inferno gave her a genuine smile. If he was feeling bold enough, he might even have tried to kiss her. But at this moment, he jetted. He was sure to grab the remains of the toaster on his way out the back door, though. There might be something more to this.
Alrighty, Rev here with some judges' comments real quick. So I believe I mentioned it at the end of the last episode when I shared the prompt. This is a quote from the Across the Spider-Verse movie. I think I actually misspoke and I said Across the Spider-Punk movie, which is funny, but not what the movie is. I would love to watch that movie, but very different. I digress. It's from Across the Spider-Verse. It is said by Spider-Punk, Hobie Brown, and I didn't have I don't think I had a particular way I thought this prompt would be interpreted. If I'm not mistaken at the time, I don't know if anyone in my group had watched the movie at that time. My group was Bones, Cricket, and Safety Matches. But they each wrote something very distinct, very unique. They all had their own very interesting take on it. And I was, delighted to read them all and see. I love when a prompt I share, or any prompt really, whether I'm writing for it or just reading the other groups, I love when a prompt gets interpreted differently by everyone. I think that's a lot of fun. It's also very fun, though, when the prompt is interpreted in almost the exact same way. But that's beside the point. After rereading them, the 3 entries, I, would highly recommend, if you have a little bit of cash to spare, of course, to check out the Patreon so you can read the Embers. Bones and Cricket both did a phenomenal job with the prompt, but I love Safety Matches. He's so good at world building, just every time he writes. And we've talked about it a bit, and world building is one of his favorite aspects of writing, if I'm not mistaken. And even in such a short piece, the amount that you can begin to see of this world is just delightful. And I do especially, I'm a sucker for hero and villain being in a relationship, whether they know it or not. And it was, just on all accounts, Safety Matches delivered. He always does. He always does. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Yeah, that was that one. Honestly, reading that one again made me kind of want to write for these characters again, so that's fun. But, man, and another display of Seth apparently drinks lead paint in his free time. Oh yeah, I gotta go find the prompt that I gave to the next people. This is why I'm your guys' favorite, right? I'm everyone's favorite. That's how it works. This was prompt 230, so I'm looking for prompt 231, because that is how math works. That didn't work. Yay! I found it. I'm the smartest. Oh, the prompt I made this week was, you truly lack the ability to even begin comprehending how little I care about your opinion. I can't remember exactly the context of how I came up with that prompt, but I believe that's something that I said to someone in real life. Don't feel bad for them. They deserved it. I can't remember who it was or why I said that, but if I said it to them, they deserved it. Yeah. So I guess this is the point where I will pretty much sign off. One quick thing I will say is that the other podcast that I'm a co-host on, Pod/Cast, the first season of that is actually going to come to an end because one of my fellow co-hosts is going to be studying abroad in Europe for 3 months. So if you want to, go check that out. That'd be super cool of you. But otherwise, keep those fires burning and get excited for more episodes of this podcast.
The Cell Block Scorch is a production of Stellacore, an independent group of nerds sharing their obsessions with the world. We can be reached at thestellacore@gmail.com, through comments on your podcast platform of choice, our Instagram, Stella_core, and at our YouTube, also called Stellacore. Feel free to check out our other productions on our YouTube channel, or our cosplays on Instagram. If you would like to support our creative endeavors, you can give a one-time tip to the Ko-Fi of the writer of your favorite Scorches, or check out our Patreon, linked in the show notes. There, you can access the winning Scorches and episode transcripts for free, or sign up for Spark level support for $5 a month. to gain access to all of the Scourge submissions.